What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 149 of the Club and Sub podcast. This week, we're talking UFC Paris. We got Ciryl Gane trying to finally get a W over a grappler, and he's taking on Serghei Spivac. Serghei Spivac, guy we like on the podcast. I'm excited to talk about that fight a little later on in the show. First things first, guys, if you like the show, drop a like and subscribe. From now on, I'm going to drop timestamps in there for all the people that complain about timestamps every week when we get done with this show. We're going to try to up the production quality a bit. But first, let's talk about last week. We had a 5 a.m. Eastern time card. It was UFC Singapore. It was even too early for breakfast cocktails. I was doing coffee and bacon at 5 a.m. last Saturday. And I had a good card. Finally broke out a little bit here. Ended up plus 3.95 units. Would have been more, but like I had originally had 4 units on Anthony Smith plus 125, and I actually hedged that down to about 2.5 units worth of risk. I mean, look, in that fight, in terms of the decision, I thought Span might get it just on optics, but the truth of the matter is, I mean, I thought Smith did the better work for most of that round, and it was just, kind of big shots at the end that made it lean towards Span. And I really think Smith wins that far more often than not if he doesn't fuck his eye up. It seemed like all the wind went out of his sails when that happened. And the fact that Ryan Span couldn't go out there and beat Anthony Smith the last 7 minutes of that fight, basically with his eyes swollen shut and looking like a corpse. I mean, I think that speaks a lot to how that fight goes. So I felt fine about that bet. I had Parker Porter for 2.5 units. Honestly, I think it was a pretty bad bet in retrospect, even though I like to say, with early KOs, they're not predictable. I was chatting with our boy C about this, and he was like, I just feel like more often than not with a lot of these fights, we're undervaluing the early KO one, especially at heavyweight. And I think that's probably true. I mean, Porter's 38 years old. We've seen him wobbled a bunch. We knew Tafa's most dangerous path was going to be early and that Porter might struggle to get him down early. So I don't feel good about that. Kind of sucked, is what it is. Had a unit and a half on Lucas Brzeski against Waldo Cortez Acosta. I mean, no strong feelings here. I knew Brzeski was bad, just kind of a play at the number. I'm plus 250. Had a unit on Kenan Song, plus 283. Obviously felt great about this. I still didn't really understand what where all of the Rolando Bedoya love was originating from. I mean, this is a guy who was plus 300 in his first UFC fight, who'd fought nobody regionally, who was minus 300 against a guy with 8 UFC fights who was above 500 in the UFC. I mean, you just don't get those kind of lines very often if it's not a grappler. And then I had 2.88 units on Sungwoo Choi, minus 144. Felt fine about that. Almost had a heart attack when he got knocked down in round 2. But otherwise, I mean, it was more or less easy work for Choi for most of that fight. So, yeah, I mean, again, classic guy who's been fighting really good competition, who was a favorite against most of it, takes a giant step down, and now he's a small favorite against the bum. It was just an easy bet there. So, yeah, good week for me. How did you fare, Lags?
Only had one bet, and it was a loser, unfortunately. I had 1 unit on the under 1.5 rounds in the Nakamura-Garcia fight, and Garcia, as usual, proved to be a tough out. So, had its spots, but, yeah, it is what it is. Small loss for me.
All right. So, with that out of the way, we will jump to UFC Paris. Now it is noon Eastern time. This is breakfast cocktail season, guys. But I don't know. I don't think I'm going to go with the mimosa this week. I don't know if anybody's ever had it. A little of the Moet Rosé champagne. That really slaps if you're into rosé. It's summer. It's the last card of the summer. Get it in. Enjoy it. Have some rosé. Maybe after you're done with that, have a beer. Make some hot dogs. Make some burgers. It's Labor Day weekend, guys. We got to enjoy it. And we had a decent card. I mean, a lot of French folks on it. Lags, real quick, how do you think the French are going to perform here? I think they're going to perform okay compared to how they usually perform in the UFC. What are your thoughts?
I'm going to say, so how many, I'm going to count real quick in total. So we got 3. That doesn't count because we got 2 French.
We have 1 auto win with
2
French
against
each
I saw
other.
that. Yep. So we have 7 in total that don't include the Gomis and Ghemmouri fight. So I'm going to say...
What about Edward? Are we counting her as French?
No.
I mean, I think she's Haitian. Oh, no, she's Panamanian. Never mind.
No, but I'm still counting... I was counting Cornolle, and I guess that fight's still there. So 7 fights in total with French fighters, not counting French versus French. I would say they at least go 500, I think. I think 4 and 3. Above 500.
I think so, too. Paris is going to be rocking. I think it's a good week for France. I think it's a good week for France here. So, yeah, let's jump into it. First fight of the fight night. fight I do not give a single shit about. We got Jacqueline Cavalcanti taking on Zara Fairn. Cavalcanti minus 350, comeback on Fairn plus 285. I'm not going to say a lot here. Fairn is one of the worst fighters in the history of the UFC. She's really terrible. Sure, if she gets an outside kickboxing match, she could obviously win that. Obviously, she's the more experienced fighter, so not really going to be looking to, dabble with juice on Cavalcanti. But Cavalcanti, and I like the Moscato myself, Brick Squad. But Cavalcanti, physical woman, she can grapple a bit. If she implements it at all, she's going to dominate here. Not much else to say. This fight sucks. Shouldn't be on the card. What are your thoughts, Lags?
Well, to start off, so French is going to go 0-1 to start the night off. So not great for that above 500 record we were talking about. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Fairn's one of the worst women to ever get signed by the UFC. Cavalcanti's pretty big power on the feet, decent grappling upside. I think she should be all right, but I think she's pretty low level herself. This is just a low level fight all around.
Yeah, agreed. Moving on. Cool fight here. Farid Basharat taking on Klidson Rodrigues. Basharat minus 350. Comeback on Rodrigues plus 285. Any thoughts here?
I guess the main talking point obviously is Klidson moving up from 125 to 135. But I feel like Klidson just falls in that type for me that is just like that Brazilian bangers that don't have a really coherent game plan. Cardio's not that great, kind of like the Joe Anderson Brito-esque type. I think Farid should be fine here. I think he can poke from the outside on the feet. I think he has grappling upside here late in the fight. But yeah, I think he should be fine.
Yeah, I have a bit of regret at not grabbing Farid at the early price, but I hadn't looked at it yet, and I saw like minus 210 a couple weeks ago. I was like, I'm not jumping into an hour or two worth of tape on Farid Basharat and Klidson Rodrigues 3 weeks out. Right. I should have, because obviously it's minus 350 now. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. The thing for me is I think you could make a Klidson argument, but I just feel like there's so many more question marks on the Klidson side. Like, I don't think Farid is special like his brother. Like, I don't think he's an okay striker, but he's obviously a strong wrestler, fairly good grappler. He's a much bigger man. I mean, this guy's a guy who's been fighting at 135 for some time, whereas Klidson, he's a 125 pounder. Outside of his power, I'm not sure much else that he has there. He's got okay volume, but I don't really love his grappling. The way he looked on bottom against what is his name? Vergara was just dreadful to me. And I just don't trust his gas tank, because you saw him gas out in that fight. And while Farid can slow a bit, Farid's gonna bring a pace. Like, even against Blackshear, he was slowing down late, but he was still attempting takedowns and forcing it. So it's like, I think all the really dominant win upside is on the Farid side here. Maybe Klidson has power at 135, but that's something we don't really know, and it's not something I really want to find out in a fight where he could potentially just get laid on for 15 minutes. So pass for me. I think Farid takes care of business, though. Moving on, weird fight. We got Nora Cornolle, I guess that's how you pronounce it, taking on Jocelyn Edwards. I don't know how to feel about this fight.
It seems like a classic John betting Jocelyn spot.
So I will tell you something. That is definitely true. Yes. And the current price is Cornolle minus 111, comeback on Edwards minus 109. But something I've noticed about myself, and I am in, after how bad the first 8 months of this year went, I'm in we make improvements. We don't keep trying to bang a square peg into a round hole. I keep losing money on women's fights. It's like at some point, this is like 5 years running. Like, my ROI on men's fights, very good. My ROI on women's fights, very bad. It's like, should I continue to keep? I will obviously break them down, and maybe if something really stands out, sure, take a shot. But like, Jocelyn Edwards ain't it, man. Like, this is like, I feel on principle she is the side, because Jocelyn Edwards obviously has many more fights, much higher level experience. It's just very hard to trust a woman like Cornolle to really perform at a high level when she's taking such a large jump in competition as she is here. The other side of that is, though, I do think Cornolle's game could give Edwards some real problems. She will grapple here and there. She seems strong and physical. And we've seen when Edwards gets put on her back, she's just got nothing there. She has no way to get up. She's good at keeping her guard, but she just won't get up. Very, very easy to take down and hold down. And so, yeah, I can't, like I said, I'm trying to steer away from women fights in general. And a fight where it's like the one side I lean could potentially get top time for 15 minutes, I don't really want to get involved in. But like, I don't think you can possibly take at Pick'em, someone like Cornolle taking this kind of a big step up here against Edwards. What are your thoughts? I'll pick Cornolle, by the way.
Yeah, agreed in that aspect. Like, it's, if you're betting it, I feel like it has to be Edwards just because of the experience, everything like that. But like you touched on Cornolle's wrestling game, I think she can be aggressive, probably find a finish because Edwards just plays guard off her back, can't be held down. Again, another low-level fight, just like we talked about with the first fight. Easy pass.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Don't need to get invested.
Moving on. This is a fun fight. We got Ange Loosa. He's taking on Rhys McKee. There's been some money on McKee lately. Current price on Loosa, minus 164. Comeback on McKee, plus 144. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
Not a lot of strong thoughts here for me. I feel like Loosa being a big favorite is probably predicated on grappling success because I feel like on the feet, both guys are pretty hittable, but I do favor Loosa's power and the hardware. So, I mean, maybe like minus 150-ish for Loosa. I feel like the line's more or less fine.
Yeah, I'm considering. What are your thoughts on the under here?
I don't know, honestly. Like, personally, I don't rate McKee as a finisher. That's my take. I get Loosa's there to be hit. Don't get me wrong, but I don't rate him as a finisher.
Fair enough. I've actually considered the under, just because, I mean, McKee's going to come for you. That's just his style, is to just take it to you and try to get you out of there. And I think he's a decent hitter, but he's very fucking slow. It's funny because, like, I was initially strongly considering Rhys here, and I still think, gun to my head, if I had to make what I think would be a plus EV bet, it would probably be Rhys, just because he is a lot taller. He's a lot longer. As you mentioned, both guys are really hittable. And so it's like, if they're in a firefight, do you really want to have money on, the favorite in that kind of a fight? I do think Loosa's got a bit of grappling upside, though. I mean, I don't know. Is Loosa a better grappler than Morono? I'm not sure that he is. And Morono didn't really hold him down till late in the fight. And it's not like we've seen Loosa come out and shoot 10 to 15 takedowns in a fight. It's like 3 or 4 takedowns. If they come, they come. If they don't, they don't. And my biggest concern on the Loosa side of things is just his volume. We've seen this guy just take pictures in the pocket a lot. I actually think if Loosa just uncorked an overhand right every time McKee threw his jab, I mean, it's basically free. McKee is there to get crushed every time he puts his jab out there, and he does it a lot. But we saw that being the case literally 2 fights ago for Loosa. He fought Munir Lazzez, and Lazzez was standing straight up without moving his head every time he threw the jab. And Loosa just really never picked up on it until like very, very late in that fight. Now, maybe he makes some adjustments, and he does here. And if he does that, I think he's just going to murder McKee. But broadly speaking, I think it's going to be a war. To your point, the reason I'm not betting McKee is I do trust the hardware of Loosa a bit more. I mean, the bottom line is, he's been hurt in the UFC, but he's gone in there and just eaten shots from some like big hitters like Lazzez and Madalena. It's just, I think you have to trust his durability more.
And Fletcher too.
And Fletcher, yeah, who hits hard too. Fletcher actually had him on skates badly in that fight. But I've seen McKee hurt way worse than I've seen Loosa hurt. And McKee just doesn't, he hasn't even heard of defense. So, yeah, I lean the Loosa side, but I think these boys are going to bang. I'm kind of tempted to plus money under. Yeah. That's touche. But I do think these guys are going to bang it out here on the feet. And I think there's a decent chance someone gets dropped. So, I lean under. I guess I'll pick Loosa, but I think McKee's going to compete here. Moving on, Taylor Lapilus, Colin Loughran. I am going to bet Lapilus. I'm still monitoring this line. He's currently, I believe, is minus 149 last time I checked. Minus 149 comeback on Loughran, plus 129. I think Loughran's an interesting prospect. He's obviously got tremendous physicality, pretty fast hands, hits hard. He's obviously shown off, decent grappling regionally. I think Loughran could potentially have a very, very high ceiling. What I don't like so much about Loughran, especially in the context of this fight, is, first of all, the guy really hasn't fought anybody. Like, his 2 best wins are Luke Shanks and Dylan Hazan. And, Shanks, he dominated fairly easily, but Shanks is never sniffing the UFC. And Hazan maybe will one day, but, Dylan Hazan is a grappler. And, he was hurting Hazan a lot more than Hazan was hurting him. But Hazan was touching him up a lot on the feet in that fight. And the Hazan striking is really quite poor. We saw Shanks touching him up on the feet too for the brief moments it was there. So, like, Colin does a lot of stuff to offset his lack of defense on the feet and how kind of plodding and slow he is in terms of movement. Obviously, his hands are quite fast. but I feel like he's going to struggle a lot with a guy like Taylor Lapilus. Lapilus is a bit taller. He's a good bit longer. He is very, very good at managing space and not getting himself in heavy exchanges and picking his shots very well. He's very accurate. He's very sharp on the counter. He's a southpaw who has a lot of familiarity with orthodox fighters, whereas Callan does not have a ton of familiarity with southpaws. I feel on the feet, he's just going to absolutely smoke Loughran there. Obviously, Loughran could hurt Lapilus. Like, he's got heavy, heavy hands. It wouldn't be surprising, but I don't think it happens at a high clip. I mean, Lapilus has never been finished. In the grappling, I suppose that's a viable path for Loughran. I shouldn't say I suppose. It is a viable path for Loughran here. But, I mean, Lapilus, he had an 81% defense in his last time in the UFC. He's fought some really good grapplers. Oka Sasaki couldn't do much to him. Josh Hill tried very, very, very hard to grapple him. And Josh Hill comes from, like, a legit wrestling background, like, much more legit than Callan's. And he just couldn't hold him down at all. He got him down a couple times, was able to clinch up with him. But Lapilus popped right back up. And so I kind of think that's what will happen if Loughran pursues a grappling-heavy game plan. And when you look at Loughran's physique, I don't know. It reeks to me that, like, if this guy tries to come out here and shoot 10, 12 takedowns, he's going to slow down. I mean, this guy is so freaking muscle-strapped and so stocky. I cannot imagine he has that kind of energy to come and push like a Merab-type game plan. Obviously, if he can do that, then he's an incredible prospect. And I think he's a decent prospect anyway. But I tend to side on the fact of no. I do think he could potentially get back takes. But again, I don't know how high percentage that is. And ultimately, I look at them and, like, Loughran's best win is Dylan Hazan. Whereas, Taylor Lapilus was 3-1 in the UFC at 24 years ago. He beat Josh Hill, who, in my opinion, is basically a much more mature and developed version of Callan Loughran, and he beat him pretty cleanly. It went to split, but I mean, it was a garbage split, to be honest. He beat Marcus Breno, who is a much better striker than Hazan, and taller and longer, or not than Hazan, than Loughran, much taller and longer. The guy, I mean, he's got 3x the amount of fights and has fought way better competition and beaten way better competition. To me, this should be more like minus 200 Lapilus here. What are your thoughts, Legs?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lapilus should have a pretty definitive striking edge. I think he should have, I mean, like you touched on the experience edge, massive, and a little bit of narrative. I don't like with, under 10 fights, getting a new opponent on fight week in enemy territory.
And a super vet, like a big vet on,
right,
right.
20 plus fight experience for him, under 10 fights for Callan. Don't love it. But yeah, I do like his wrestling grappling game, but like you touched on already as well, it's low level guys. It's super, super low level guys. So I got to see it in the UFC first, but I think this is a great fight. And I love this fight way more than the Callan Ghemmouri original fights. So yeah, should be a good one. Yeah,
agreed. Moving on, really good one here. We got Morgan Charriere making his debut. He's minus 340. He's taking on Manolo Zecchini. The comeback on him is plus 280. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
I think this is another one that could be a great fight too, but I feel like Zecchini more or less is outgunned. I think on the feet, I think Morgan is a better striker. I know the pace isn't quite there, but I think he is a much better striker. I think probably equal-ish power. But I think Morgan has a huge grappling edge here. So I think big favorite totally makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like Morgan is like a classic less than the sum of his parts type of guy. Like, he has skills everywhere. He really should be a lot better than he's been. He's not that old, but he's a great athlete. But I just feel like anytime he ever gets a run going, he loses a fight just because he'll make like a really dumb decision. Like, he'll engage in the grappling with grapplers where he needs to be striking, and vice versa. We'll strike with decent strikers instead of grappling. But I'm with you here. Look, Zecchini, I like how proactive he is and aggressive he is. Like, he obviously throws a lot of strikes. He swings heavy hands, and he'll go for it. And so that alone is enough. Like, I don't really want Morgan at minus 340. But at the same time, like you said, I think he's hugely outgunned here. On the feet, Morgan's way faster, way sharper, heavier hands. And to your point, if he decides to actually fight intelligently for once, Morgan just can absolutely mog this guy on the mat. I just don't think, if Morgan decides to grapple, I don't think there's much that he can do about it. To me, again, I'm not betting Morgan, but this is Morgan Charriere's debut in the UFC. He's been hyped up for a long time. It's in France. Like, it's pretty clear the reason Zecchini is getting the call to the UFC right now and why he's getting it on this specific card against this specific opponent. It's definitely, in my opinion, a showcase spot for Morgan. And, Zecchini could bonk him, but I feel like Morgan should take care of business. So he's the pick for me. Should win this fairly handily. Lags, throwing it back to you, though. We got William Gomis taking on Giannis Ghemmouri. Current price, Gomis minus 240. Come back on Ghemmouri plus 205. What are your thoughts?
I think it's just, at the end of the day, probably a close fight. And I'm probably going to have a bet on Ghemmouri at plus 210 just because I feel like it's a low – both these guys are pretty mirrors of each other. I feel like they're just low output kickboxers. I feel like if anybody's going to have grappling success, it's probably Ghemmouri. So I feel like this is just a much, much closer fight. So, yeah.
Yeah, I did not tape this fight.
Fair.
I was going to tape it today or yesterday, and the fights got canceled. Was pretty busy with work today, so didn't have a chance to look at it. I'll tell you this. Anybody who's a bit high volume and will at least, be aggressive against Gomis, I'd be interested in fading him with this number. I do not think – I had a bet on Almeida before that got canceled. To me, Gomis is a guy who I respect the way he games the system, just staying on his bike and trying to point strike. But the bottom line is when guys start throwing leg kicks at you or just start throwing heavy heat, it's kind of hard to maintain that game over the long term. Daz asked Morgan TKO. I think that's a decent shout. What do you think, Lags?
I'm leaning more sub. Like I lean more sub, but
okay.
Yeah. What's the price on the TKO though?
That's a good question.
I don't know
right now. We're speeding through this card.
Knockout. So. I know we are. We got to slow down here a little bit.
Charriere by KO plus 175 and sub plus 450. Actually, sub's a lot better. Sub is plus 450. Yeah, I would lean to the sub side too, at least in terms of betting value. Moving on, Volkan Oezdemir. He's taken on another debutant, Bogdan Guskov. Current price on Oezdemir is minus 175. Come back on Guskov plus 150. I'm pretty heavy on Oezdemir at like minus 150 here. I still think there's value on him right now. I've seen some Guskov takes, and they seem to center around Volkan's looked old and slow, so fade him against the younger fighter. Here's the thing. Like, Volkan Oezdemir, like, he's getting shit for the Paul Craig fight. And it's like, I'm not saying he looked great, but like, the guy won a dominant 30-27 fight. The fight was never competitive. And people are like, he looked bad against Paul Craig. And it's like, what do you want him to do? He controlled him for over a round of time in that fight, was never threatened by his subs, and easily won the stand-up. The other two fights he has sandwiched in there, he lost to Ankalaev and he lost to Krylov. He won the first round against Krylov, but Krylov, dude, I mean, Krylov's pace has been insane. The dude attempted 20 takedowns in that fight and just kept coming at him. Like, he's not going to see that from Bogdan. His last three losses are Krylov, Ankalaev, Yuri Prohaska. Sandwiched in there are dominant performance against Latifi, win over Alex Rakic, dominant win against Paul Craig. I understand the takes that Volkan doesn't look the same that he used to look and yada, yada, yada. But guys, I mean, the difference between the guys that are beating Volkan, who he's going to decision with, by the way, he's not getting finished by Krylov, who's a huge finisher, or Ankalaev, who's a big finisher. He's going to decision with these guys, and Bogdan Guskov are enormous. Like, if you want to tell me like top 10 guy he's fighting, you're like, I don't really want to trust Volkan. I get that. But to me, I look at Bogdan and it's like, this guy, he's got like 13 round 1 KOs, but I actually don't think he's that hard a hitter. He's fighting like 45-year-old men and just straight up bums. Like, the one real guy he fought who was coming up on weight, who he had a huge reach and size edge against, literally cut through him and cut him to ribbons in about 7 minutes. The guy's got no standing defense. He's a poor wrestler. He looks very, very gassy to me. And like I said, I don't think he's that explosive. Like, I don't think this is Jiri 2.0 coming for Volkan here. We're getting a guy who I would say is, his best case is like a mid-tier UFC light heavyweight. His worst case is, his power is not nearly as good as it looks regionally, and this guy just sucks and doesn't belong in the UFC. And he's taking on a guy who's only been fighting top 5 people at light heavyweight. Like, to me, that price is crazy. Like, it makes a lot more sense to have Volkan minus 300. Like, if he gets chin tapped early here, okay. But I can't look at Volkan not looking great against Krylov and Ankalaev and say, oh man, I'm really worried about how he's going to do against this super mid debutante who's fighting him here. I like Volkan here. I think he's got, a number of ways he could win this fight. I think he can grapple. I think he could just rip leg kicks. Yeah, I mean, I think he should really crush here. Daz mentioned he doesn't seem to have nothing behind them, but they still have effect. Yeah, I mean, Volkan, he's a very compact guy, and he knows how to time his shots, and he picks his shots very effectively. Dude, Volkan's like a 10-fight UFC vet who fought for the title. This guy is, and he's 33. He's not 45 years old, So it's Volkan all day for me here. What do you think, Lags?
I like the under 1.5. We talked about this right before we came on live here. I like the under 1.5 at minus 120. It's even out there at like minus 130. I mean, this guy, Guskov, has never won a fight past 7.5 minutes ever. I mean, his win condition is solely around 1 KO here. And I think Volkan honestly should dust him early here. Guskov, no striking defense like you touched on. His one loss that's actually available, you can watch. I mean, dude gets hurt by a jab and then seconds later gets put out flush. I mean, a horrible look. And guy's not that good. So I think Volkan should make easy work of this. But yeah, I love the under 1.5 at like near pickup.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all. Moving on, though, throw it to you here. We got Benoit Saint-Denis. He's minus 160. He's taking on Thiago Moises. Come back on Moises plus 140. What are your thoughts here?
You know what, John, I came up with the perfect analogy for this one, I feel like. And so, you know what, you're sitting out, you're going for dinner. It's you and your wife. All right. You go to the bathroom. Your wife's gone. She's not sitting at the table anymore. Now, which one of these guys do you think likely took your wife?
I mean, obviously BSD.
Exactly. So that's kind of how I feel with this matchup in general. You got one alpha, you got the beta. I understand like the arguments for Moises, super UFC veteran, guy's got solid grappling himself, but I just feel like he's just not very aggressive on the feet. I mean, I feel like BSD is just going to be coming after him. I don't think there's going to be a ton of grappling success for him early, but I just feel like the pace and the pressure that BSD brings is Moises is going to accept it. I feel like it's more or less.
So you brought up the one. So I bet Moises for 2 units at plus 140 here. And you brought up really the one concern I have, which is that Moises does get wilty. Like it's happened a few times. Like the Joel Alvarez fight, that fight, he had every tool he needed to easily win that fight. And he just kind of caved to Alvarez's pressure very early, just didn't want anymore. And that's a fairly large concern of mine in this fight. Because BSD, as you mentioned, the guy is just a rabid animal. He's going to just come for him until he has nothing left.
And sorry to interrupt you real quick. I mean, even talk about the Michael Johnson fight, which one people might not talk about. I mean, the first round, guy doesn't land any strikes. Obviously, ends up getting the win, but I mean, what are we doing here?
I know. You're not wrong. You're not wrong about any of that. But like, I still think Moises is getting better. You know, he's only 28 years old. He's at ATT, and the truth of the matter is, you know. I know it's a trope for me, but it's like, I mean, Moises' last 2 losses are Joel Alvarez and Islam Makhachev. I mean, I don't think he's getting much shit for either of those. He beat Melikaz Al-Costa, who's a decent prospect, destroyed Christos Giagos, easily beat Alex Hernandez, robbed Bobby Green. I mean, I still haven't gotten over that fight, to be quite honest. But the point that I'm making is that he's been fighting at an extraordinarily high level here. Saint-Denis on the other side. I mean, I bet this guy in his last fight, he was plus 265 against Gabriel Bonfim. People were pricing Gabriel Bonfim like he was a top 10 fighter because he beat Terrence McKinney. But like that, it was insane, you know, the way the market was pricing Bonfim. And obviously BSD kind of blew through him, but Bonfim was very, very clearly being overrated by the market. And you look at the fights prior to the Bonfim fight, okay, he ripped through Gabriel Miranda on short notice. We'll talk about Gabriel Miranda next week, but he's not very good. He tore through Nicholas Stolze, who was a welterweight, who came down to lightweight, who's not very good. And he got destroyed by the one quality fighter he's fought, which was Daleski Dos Santos up at welterweight. And so now I look at this, and it's like, is there a chance that Benoit Saint-Denis does fall under that Merab Colby Covington type where he's just got infinite cardio and can go forever? There's a chance. I don't think it's as good a chance as the market thinks, though. Like there's a reason those guys are a dime a dozen, that there's only like 4 of them in the entire UFC. If it turns out that he's another, like he'll obviously move up and get into the rankings sooner than later. But we've seen this guy gas out before. It happened against Zaleski. It happened a couple times regionally. This guy can slow down. He can be counter grappled himself. I'll say this against BSD. You know, after the first, he took a couple takedown attempts that were pretty ugly, where he left his neck out there in really dangerous places. And I kind of think you said against BSD. Oh, sorry, against Gabriel Bonfim. And I kind of think there are going to be openings for Moises to counter grapple here. Like one of the things on rewatch of the Makhachev fight that impressed me about Moises was he actually was kind of moving Islam around a bit in the clinch. Like he was able to reverse from the over-under position a couple times there. He actually looked very physically strong, which I thought, I mean, he did lose the fight fairly dominantly, but he competed in spots in that fight. And like, if he was having that kind of clinch success with Makhachev, I think he's going to have it here. I mean, he's certainly the better jiu-jitsu player. I feel like if Denis gets on top of him, there's a decent chance Moises can just get up. Whereas if Moises gets on top of Denis, I think he's going to absolutely fuck him up here. And on the feet, you know, BST's a wild, aggressive animal, but he's got no defense. He's very, very easy to counter. He's easy to leg kick. And Moises is a very good counter striker. So I feel like skill for skill, Moises is clearly the more skilled fighter. He's also clearly the more tested fighter who's got both more experience and has fought a way higher level of competition. The real question is just, is BSD the next Merab? Because if he's not, I think Moises is going to beat him pretty easily here. So I have 2 units, Moises plus 140. And again, if I'm wrong, I'm going to be wrong in a big way. Like if I'm wrong, Denis probably, like, do you see a scenario where this is a grindy split decision? I feel like Denis either dominates or Moises wins this pretty easily. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I could see.
What if he slows down? Maybe it's a close.
Right. Like a close fight for Moises. Yeah, close edging it out because he slows down. Yeah.
Yeah. Paul Braswell said Moises has no heart. That's my biggest concern with the fight. I know Moises has the skills here to win this fight. I have very little doubt about that. It's really whether or not he can dig deep here against the guy that is going to bring it to him from minute 1 in France. But Brazil's making a comeback. The Brazilians are going into enemy lines, and you know the French have capitulated. The French have capitulated. The French have capitulated Paris before, is all I'm going to say. And it could happen again here.
All I was going to add is that Moises, I mean, like we touched on a little bit, though, but Moises is a confidence-based fighter, in my opinion, like 100%. So, I mean, yeah. Not much to add, not much more to add. Yep.
Moving on, we got Manon Fiorot taking on Rose Namajunas. Rose coming up to 125 for the first time in her career. Fiorot's minus 175. Comeback on Rose plus 150. Again, I'm staying away from women's fights that could be dicey, so I'm not betting it, but I think Fiorot is the side here. And I say this as someone who has faded her unsuccessfully a few times. But I just, first of all, I don't think Rose has any business at 125. Like she wasn't, I mean, she was a decent sized strawweight, but it's not like she was a giant like Tatiana. She's giving up a decent amount of height and reach here to Fiorot. She's going to be giving up a lot of power. You know, I look back to the Chookagian fight, and it's like Chookagian's one of the best volume strikers in the division, and Fiorot outlanded her by 30 significant strikes. I think I would favor Chookagian, to be honest, against Rose striking. Chookagian's a lot taller than she is. She's 5'9". She's got a 68-inch reach. Rose is 5'5" with a 64-inch reach. I don't think Rose presents nearly the same issues to Fioirot that Chookagian did standing. So I think Fioirot should be able to get more volume off. I think she hits a bit harder. And I think if anybody has grappling upside here, it's Fioirot. You know, we've actually seen her do a decent amount of wrestling and look decent from top position. You know, she fought off Mayra Bueno Silva's submission attempts. No problem. I wouldn't be surprised to see her get 2 or 3 takedowns here and hold Rose down. And again, this is all narrative, but like Rose moving to 125 and then talking about how she thought it was over for her, but she thinks she might have a little bit left to get. It's very weird because especially when the 115-pound champion is a woman you've beaten twice. Now you're moving up to a division where there's a bunch of horrible stylistic mismatches. It seems to me, just like reading the tea leaves, that she just doesn't want to cut weight anymore and is probably collecting a paycheck. I could be wrong, but I think Fiorot handles her here. What do you think, Legs?
Yeah, I mean, pretty obvious to everybody else. She has no business at 125. I mean, there's not a ton of advantages she has, really. And yeah, I mean, I think she's outgunned on the feet here. I think Manon definitely, like, volume-wise, I should say. Yeah. I think Fiorot, volume-wise, should be fine. Grappling-wise, I think if anybody, like I said, like you touched on, I should say, if anybody's going to have grappling success, probably Fiorot as well. I've been trying to I should say I haven't tried to fade her. I just dislike her in general. And I don't think she's like elite in any aspect, but decent striker.
No, but she's big and physical and throws a lot of volume.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that'll
probably
be enough.
That wins women's fights.
Moving on, though, we're going to find out, is Ciryl Gane allergic to grappling? The market seems to think yes.
I don't think so.
The current line right now on this fight is Ciryl Gane minus 164. The comeback on Spivac is plus 144. What are your thoughts here, Legs?
Well, John, I'm going to pull you up Serghei Spivac's wins that he has won via grappling. Jared Vandera, one of the worst grapplers that we've probably ever seen in the division. Alexei Oleinik, a fight that I would say he didn't look the best. Won via decision, wasn't the greatest. Greg Hardy, out of the UFC, probably one of the worst grapplers in the heavyweight division at the time. Augusto Sakai, people thought was massive value at that spot. Again, horrible grappler, fat guy, not great cardio. And then Derek Lewis. We know how bad Derek Lewis's ground game is. Sakai is a good or Spivac, I should say, is a good grappler. Don't get me wrong, but like he's primarily judo guy. He's not a guy who's shooting singles, not shooting doubles. I feel like most of his success is probably predicated in an early sub. I don't think an extended fight favors Spivac. I think Gane probably finishes well on the feet. I think they were just taking a lot from the Jones quick finish.
Yeah, I agree. I'm big on Gane here. It's funny because this could go one of two ways. I could either be right hugely, or it'll be a rerun of the Merab Yan fight where I was wrong.
I think either whoever wins, it's likely going to look like massive favorite in hindsight.
Yeah, I completely agree. But here's my thing, and you just touched on it, so I'm not going to rehash all those people he's fought. But like you're talking about, go look at the UFC's history and like every other division in the UFC. We don't have many any judo-based grappling specialists. Like any at all, you know? And there's a reason for that, because judo throws, for the most part, if you know what you're doing, they're fairly easy to avoid if you just post and like know how to have balance and know how to move your hips. Like we see people get judo thrown every week, but it's usually because of like an Uchimata that they weren't expecting. You rarely see someone go out there and land 4 or 5 in a row. The reason Spivac is able to do it is just because the athleticism gap between like the lower weight classes and heavyweight is gigantic. Like Augusto Sakai, he's like, no offense to him, he's a tough fighter, but he's like a fat guy with no balance. Like, you know, Derek Lewis, you know, I mean, look at the way Lewis was getting up and just tumbling back over. He wasn't like, Spivac wasn't like working hard. It was kind of just like subtle weight shift, Lewis back on his face. You know, like there's just no balance. Same thing when you go back to Bandera, when you look at the Tuivasa fight, because these guys aren't athletes and they're not particularly well schooled in grappling. Now he's taking on Ciryl Gane, and Ciryl Gane is a elite athlete. I don't think just for the division in general. Ciryl Gane is an unbelievable athlete. And you look at the last time he fought an athlete, and now the fight lasted 2 minutes, so you don't want to like put too much stock into it. But look at the Aspinall fight. Spivac backed up pretty much right away, seated the center. The one time they tied up, Spivac tried to kind of get underneath him to toss him, and Aspinall easily just posted him and pushed him away, because it's not really that hard to stop if you know what you're doing. So that's one thing. The other thing is, look, Gane got out grappled by Ngannou, but I think that fight gets taken out of context. One, it was deep in the fight, and they were both pretty tired. Two, Ngannou's a fucking silverback. Like, the man is a freak of nature strength-wise. He was not like it's not like he was getting the takedown positions and Gane was looking horrible. He was brute forcing takedowns. And even there, you know, Gane was mostly working up, except when he was pulling heel hooks in that fight. You know, he did an okay job of getting to the fence. Even if you go to look at the Jones fight, Jones landed 2 takedowns. Both takedowns, Gane got his back to the fence pretty much right away. It wasn't like he just accepted being flat on his back and Jones teeing off on him. He got to the fence. He was in the process of working up when he got subbed. I just don't think he saw it coming. And then you look at Spivac, and it's like, I mean, Greg Hardy got up 3 times. Literally just stood up. Then you watch Sakai fight. Sakai, literally no get-up game at all. Stood up 6 times in that fight from his takedowns. Derek Lewis stood up 6 times. And so I think about it this way. And I'm like, well, let's say Spivac can get takedowns early, like a few of them. Gane's going to be able to get back to his feet here early in this fight. Of that, I'm very certain. So it's like, is Spivac, one, going to be able to hold on to him and mat return him as easy as he did the other guys? I very much doubt that. Two, if you can't finish him and Gane is able to work up and not gas out and quit the way those guys did, what's Spivac's cardio going to look like? People keep talking about his cardio being great, but Spivac hasn't fought deep into a fight in a couple years. The last time he did was against Oleinik, and he barely grappled in that fight, and he was dead gassed out. Like, he was completely gassed out on the back end of that fight. 3, if Gane does separate, the difference in striking between these two is comical in nature. Like, it's like minus 1,000 Gane on the feed. And then the other thing is, go after the Jones fight, go to Gane's Instagram. The dude was tweeting or Instagramming about being in the gym grappling on Monday. He brought in an Olympic bronze medalist 3 months ago who's been with him all camp training judo. the guy's obviously taking it pretty seriously. And so I look at this and it's like, okay, well, there's a reason we don't have judo specialists in the UFC outside of heavyweight. He's fighting an elite athlete who's clearly been putting the work in. Gane's grappling and get-up game in general is almost certainly underrated. Like, again, he didn't end up flat in his back against Jones. He got to the fence pretty easily. And if he was getting to the fence easily against Jones, I mean, Sakai and Derek Lewis and Greg Hardy all got up against Spivac. You know, I feel pretty sure he's going to get up here. And then you talk about it in space, and it's going to be Gane all day. So it's like, first of all, I don't know in a big cage if Spivac will be able to close distance at all. But second of all, I mean, Gane can win a fight where he gets taken down multiple times here. I'm very sure about that. Spivac cannot win a fight where he does not get many takedowns. He is going to need them early and often to win. And to your point, and I agree, if Spivac wins, it's probably going to look dominant, and I'm going to look like a fool for saying all this. But I have fairly high conviction that he is not going to hold Gane on the mat very long or early in this fight. And I actually think something I haven't seen anybody talk about, I actually think there's a decent amount of grappling equity on the Gane side. You know, you go back and watch Spivac against Tybura, which is the only time Spivac's been on his back in the UFC, and he looked quite poor on bottom in that fight. And Gane actually is a decent offensive wrestler himself. So, like, I think Gane could get takedowns himself here and potentially do work on top if he needs to. But yeah, I mean, look, John Jones, what do you think John Jones, but real line, not exaggerating, what would the real line be if John Jones fought Serghei Spivac tomorrow?
Probably minus 500.
Higher.
Yeah, right. Like, I like a baseline, like, right. I know. But I'm saying, like, a baseline, I would easily say, like, minus 500 opening line.
Right. Sure. And we saw John Jones close, like, minus 900 against Anthony Smith. And John Jones was minus 150 against Spivac. Or not Spivac, Gane. So the market thought Gane had a 40% chance to beat John Jones, but it's only giving him about a 60% chance to beat Serghei Spivac. Like, that's just a massive overcorrection here. And that's my thing. And I put a tweet out about this earlier in the week. It's like the people that are the Spivac bets are primarily being based on, you know, the grappling here. The market knows about that, though. Like, there's not like you're like everybody knows about Gane's grappling now. It's not a secret that you just discovered about Gane's grappling. Like, that is priced in, and I would argue to the points I was making that it's being overpriced and it's actually being underrated at this point by the market. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm getting the bet Ciryl Gane off of being plus 120 to John Jones at basically minus 150 to Serghei Spivac. I think he's going to torch him. I think he's going to knock him out here. Again, if I'm wrong, I'll be wrong huge and I'll look like an idiot. But if I'm right, it's going to look like the bet of the year. Right. I'm betting Gane. Are you betting him?
Honestly, if the line keeps coming in, because it seems like it is just keep coming in, I probably will. But I honestly want like minus 150 personally.
Fair
I'm
enough.
greedy like that.
Fair enough. But yeah, I love Gane here. I think I have 3.2 units risked on him right now. I might add to his KO
Under
line.
2.5 getting steamed.
I saw that. Which
Yep,
also
it's minus 165 now.
Feels a little extreme, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think a finish materializes here, but like Gane could string Spivac along, you know?
Yep.
And I kind of feel like if Spivac's having success, I don't think he's going to cut through Gane on bottom the way that he cut through the other guys he's fought lately. So,
and like you touched on, we touched on a little bit with the overrating and with the market already knowing about the grappling. It's probably overrated also because of, like we touched on with the strength of schedule, who he's been fighting, these grapplers that are not anywhere near in the same stratosphere level of grappling as Gane. I mean, Derek
or
Lewis,
as a fighter, just in general.
Derek Lewis, I mean, Jesus.
Well, that's the thing. And we're in a big cage, and you have a guy in Gane who is probably the best striker in heavyweight history, who controls distance like a master. Like Derek Lewis, if you just duck the overhand, like he is easy to get out inside on. Sakai wants to clinch you up. That's kind of his game, is to like clinch you up. So he was happy to go right into Spivac's range. And I mean, Greg Hardy is one of the worst to do it. Like, let's be honest. So just a huge gap here. So yeah, we'll see. I might be wrong huge here. I think I'm going to be right huge here. Lags, any closing thoughts here?
No, go France.
All right.
I think we made a decent case for most of them. War Ciryl in the main event. 12 p.m. should be good start time instead of at 5 a.m.
Oh yeah, way better start time.
And let's cash some tickets this week.
You want to hear something funny?
Yep.
So I wake up at 4:45 last week to go to the main event. And it's like, I just have my second kid. I don't have like these days, like the cards start and both my fucking kids are awake. So it's like, and like my oldest he's almost 4. So it's fucking chaos in my house every night when UFC starts, usually until about 8 p.m. when I can get them both in bed. And then it's good. So I don't get a lot of time to like do John things, decompress, watch the fights. So I wake up at 4:45. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go downstairs. I was like, I'm exhausted, but I'm going to make some coffee. I'm going to cook breakfast. This is going to be great. No one's going to be up in my house for at least 2.5, 3 hours. This is a great way to start the day. I go sit down 5:15 a.m. and I just hear this pitter patter footsteps on the stairs. And my son walks downstairs and goes, Daddy, can I come watch fights with you? It's like, I guess I guess I'm never getting me time again.
Damn. That's the life of being a parent, John.
It is.
The life of being a parent.
Is. Practice safe sex, kids. But anyway,
at least you got a much better card, at least an afternoon card to watch with him this time. You can enjoy the whole day.
And it starts during his nap time this week, which is great.
Perfect.
So there we go.
There it is.
Anyway, guys, appreciate you all coming out tonight. Please drop a like and subscribe. I'm going to drop timestamps in there shortly. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you guys next week, Wednesday night. We're talking UFC 293 at Adesanya Strickland. We're looking to getting somebody on for that, do a fun little show here.
For sure.
And it'll be episode number 150. So maybe we'll do a little giveaway. Again, I feel I owe everybody for the shitty picks I've given out this year. So
same.
We'll do something fun. Yeah, we will do something fun. Take it easy, everybody. As usual, you can find me, John, on Twitter at MMA Fox, Lags at Danny_Lags. Good night. Good luck. Peace.